Today we're going to talk about Google's new, what I call smiled upon trilogy or trinity or trio of technology: AI Max, Demand Gen, and PMax. But before we get into the content, I'll just introduce myself. Some of you in the room have been in my webinars before or know me from online, so it's really nice to see you again. And anyone new, thanks for joining. I really appreciate people for taking the time out of their day, their busy days, to join these things. I've been working in retail for, I don't know, many years, and I've been in e-commerce for, I think, like 9 years now, in advertising. And I work at this company called Smarter Ecommerce, where we have the pleasure to work with brands and multi-brand retailers all over the world. And you know, I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I'm just like the kind of one of the mouthpieces of this company, and there's actually so many talented people behind the scenes, so much great software that we built, and I'm really proud to be able to represent us in front of you all. You won't get a sales pitch from me. We're just going to get into the content, but definitely check us out at smarter-ecommerce.com if you do want to learn more. Yeah, so let's see here. Let's get into the agenda. I thought a lot about how to structure this content. It was pretty challenging, actually, in some ways. But what I came up with, I want to have kind of a preface about ads in AI services, this new category of Google services and also other properties, but we're going to be talking about Google today and Google Ads. So I think it's important for setting the context. Also, because when we talk about the Power Pack, Google really presents this technology as being the key to appearing in AI services, and I want to demystify that a bit. And then we're going to get further into the weeds of the Power Pack in a section that I call coherent cannibals, or maybe incoherent, we'll see. But I think the Power Pack there are many layers to it, and it's not quite as simple as it's presented. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Ads in AI services. I'm not going to tell you what AI overviews are. I think you probably all know. And if you don't know what AI overviews are, I guess you haven't used Google search in a while. And all you have to do is type AI overviews into Google search, and you will get an AI overview telling you what AI overviews are. So I think you can figure that out. But I do want to talk about AI mode. That's in hundreds of countries and territories, basically everywhere on Earth except for here in Europe. So we're waiting. It's the way it is with the regulatory climate here. It's very risky for companies to stick their neck out with the new products and innovations, unfortunately. But there's also an increasingly large amount of languages that are supported besides regions. And what's quite relevant for Google Ads specialists like ourselves is that ads are already in AI mode and will be coming into AI mode more and more in the future, and also AI overviews. So I have two little screenshots here. I just want to show you, like, this AI mode. Of course, it's basically like ChatGPT or any of these AI chat tools. And it's, rather than AI overviews, which are embedded in the search engine result page, this is kind of a parallel property or tab within the Google search environment. Similar to how images is its own tab, videos is its own place, AI mode is its own place. But for e-commerce advertisers and e-commerce businesses, it's quite relevant because while AI overviews haven't been triggered that much for commercial queries and e-commerce queries, AI mode is a sandbox, and people can do whatever they want in there, and they can use it as a shopping assistant. I've been using ChatGPT as a shopping assistant since the week that it launched, basically a few years back. And in all likelihood, Google's going to embrace this use case and start building in more and more shopping, browsing, and e-commerce features into AI mode. We already see that ChatGPT has done this, and so there's almost guarantees that Google will do the same, because these are the pressures that arise. So The last tip or last bullet point there, I pulled this from some sales materials from Google. They very specifically mentioned that product feed hygiene is critical. And I don't want you to just think about your product feed. I also want us to think about all of our structured product data. So on the left-hand side here, I have a quote. I think these are two of the most important sentences that there are today anywhere in Google documentation, and they predate all this AI stuff, but I think they're more relevant than ever. So not to be too annoying here, but I'm going to pretty much just read those sentences aloud. Providing both structured data on web pages and a merchant center feed maximizes your eligibility to experiences. And helps Google correctly understand and verify your data. Okay. And some experiences combine data from both the feed and your website structured data. So I think not only feed hygiene is critical, but also your markup, your structured product data that you think of for organic reasons and stuff like this. These two things together, I am utterly convinced are very important to your discoverability, not just now. So it's already great to take care of those, but especially in the future with these new AI services. And that's what I'm trying to show you here in this right-hand little quadrant thing. We are used to paid and organic product listings and e-commerce features that appear on Google surfaces, which is everywhere from the search engine result page to also YouTube and so forth, all of their properties. But we now have this entirely new category of surfaces, these AI surfaces. And it seems to me very probable that a lot of intent and demand and shopping behavior will live in these new surfaces. So it's super important that we're discoverable in both of these places. And just taking care of your product data is very important to that. A myth that I'm hearing a lot is that you can't appear in AI overviews or AI mode without PMax or AI Max, that these two tools are the key to appearing there. And I think that this is partly propagated by Google themselves sometimes, and also people who are not reading documentation in detail, maybe, because it's certainly emphasized that PMax and AI Max will serve on these properties, and Google kind of sells them as very important to be on these properties. But additionally, any kind of keywordless or broad match technology will appear. So reminder, standard shopping campaigns are keywordless. They always have been. And broad match has been around for years and years and years in standard search campaigns. That also works in AI mode and AI overviews. And it's rather the inverse of this. You have to remember that AI Max won't just serve on AI overviews or AI mode. It will serve everywhere. And I hope that's clear. So I think Google has sought to link the destiny of these two things together, and I'll show you more about that in a minute. We see it with the naming of AI Max. But before we get there, I just want to talk a little bit high level about where we are and where we're going. We are where the eye is on this little diagram, that info thing. You are here. We are at the beginning of the intermediate phase of a potentially major shift in e-commerce discovery, online shopping, and all these topics, where up till now, we've been able to depend on Google search to gain traffic to our sites organically through paid. And we've seen this channel as an acquisition channel. In the future, we're going to see that more and more AI shopping assistants will be used by consumers. This is already happening now, so it's not just like science fiction or anything like that. As I mentioned already 2 Christmases ago, I made my first major purchase using AI as a shopping assistant, and the AI wasn't custom built for that. And I'm maybe a bit of a nerd, but if I'm doing it, I'm not so special. Other people are doing it too. And this will change things from sending traffic to our e-commerce sites and acquiring customers. It's going to become more about purchases that happen in chat. So, and we'll end up just fulfilling the orders that happen there. So in this way, it's a bit of a distribution channel rather than an acquisition channel. That's what I think will happen with with AI chat and shopping assistants. I also think in all likelihood it's going to be commission based. There'll probably also be advertising layers inside there, but a core part of this will be percentage commission. And so depending on like, people used to say that at some point e-commerce would be 100% of retail, and that's not true. Will never happen. Totally unrealistic. And AI shopping assistants will never be 100% of e-commerce, but we don't know where that level will be, and we don't know how long this time horizon is or how fast this might happen. And so that totally will change the way that this curve is going to look. And if it is a larger share and it happens faster, then of course it's a steeper curve, steeper learning curve, faster changes to businesses. That's much more disruptive. But I'm optimistic that this is going to take more time and that this will present itself more as an opportunity than a threat. I'm carefully optimistic about that. But we have to recognize that we're entering a new period. And Google is really positioning the Power Pack, this combination of demand gen, PMax, and AI Max, as their technology set for this intermediate phase that we are entering now. So what is the Power Pack? Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. This is a slide I presented almost exactly a year ago, just over 1 year ago. I was on a stage at DMEXCO. It was the biggest stage I ever spoke on. There were like 600 people in the crowd in person. It was pretty terrifying. And I told them all about something that I call PMaxification. And I told them how all roads lead to PMax, and PMax is absorbing Google Ads. And it's in many ways the future of Google Ads. And that's kind of wrong. I mean, from what we knew at the time, it's correct, and I still think that it's broadly true, but the way that this is happening is a bit different. Like back then, I was speculating that keyword search might be the next thing to be migrated to Performance Max, but that isn't exactly what has happened. And I have here a really interesting leaked email between Google executives from Google Marketing Live of 2024. It was right after that. And we can really unpack what has happened with their strategy and what the Power Pack is, I think it really, a lot of it had its roots in these email exchanges here. And basically, the bottom email, that's the original one, and this top email is a reply to that. Just so you're not confused here, that's why points 1 and 2 are down there at the bottom. But there were complaints that after Google Marketing Live, the way that Google's product team and their whole marketing organization presented this technology, they felt like demand gen took a backseat, and that anything that isn't PMax is, as they say, structurally disadvantaged. And this is exactly what I was picking up on back then when I talked about PMaxification. Google's own sales team felt that it was kind of the same message out there. But where things get really interesting, the big twist here is that already back in May 2024, it was stated that the idea of pushing PMax super hard was our previous strategy. So Google was already moving beyond this PMax strategy to something broader. So while we did see campaigns consolidating into PMax for a while, they've broadened out into some new things. And there was one of the first mentions that I've ever seen of what's now called AI Max for search. Back then they were calling it Search Max or PMax for search. They said it doesn't matter what it's called. We'll figure out what it's called. And indeed, fast forward a year later to Google Marketing Live this year, and they renamed it as AI Max. And that, of course, is just market positioning. They're just trying to really sell this tool as the future of AI visibility on AI services. But actually, it's a much older technology that they've been working on for years. But yeah, I think this is super fascinating because we can really confirm from this that PMax is not going to be the end-all be-all. That's their old strategy, and now they're working on something new. And we can also see this a little bit. I'm sharing with you some adoption numbers. I've shown these before, but I never tire of it. We can see that basically Performance Max grew massively at the expense of standard campaigns like search and shopping. And I say at the expense of in quotation marks because this entire pie was growing over this period of time. You just have to look at Google's earning reports and you'll see that their average advertising revenue grew and grew and grew in this time. So it's not that like people were spending necessarily less on search in and of itself, but PMax was gaining a share of the wallet out there. And this continued until late 2023 and into 2024, where it basically plateaued and even started shrinking. PMax's share of this, or it certainly flattened. So this suggests that basically they hit a ceiling in that amount of adoption, and there are things like standard shopping campaigns. People are going to keep spending on that. That's like a stubborn core of and it's a pretty large amount. You have to remember that from Google's perspective, this is ultimately billions of dollars and the better part of their entire revenue stream for Alphabet. So shopping is very significant and remains significant, and standard search campaigns are very significant and remain significant. And so what they had to do here is find different ways to advance that automation agenda. Particularly with search, they had a very clever strategy, which was instead of like taking search campaigns and migrating them to PMax, which they talked about, they had focus groups. What if we take the PMax parts and bring it to search, which is a very clever strategy. AI Max has, I think, been much more favorably received than other campaign types or campaign flavors, technologies, because it's quite customizable and you're not forced to use it yet. And people seem to like it from that way. So that was very smart of them. And demand gen as well. Google has really opened up demand gen as well. The amount of customization you can do, the amount of transparency there is. We'll look at that. But they're telling us that these are their three technologies that they're betting on. And they're suggesting that you should use all three of these together. This is where we're going to get into some more detail about that, but I have some issues with that. Before we go there though, I don't want to, we don't have to read through this in detail right now, and you don't need to like take screenshots or anything. We take good care of our webinar guests. You'll get a copy of the recording, you'll get a copy of these slides, and you can look at them at your leisure. But PMax, I'm not even going to talk about very much today because I think I've talked about a lot and we're all pretty familiar with it. It's a very mature campaign type. And the premise is that it will find conversions anywhere. It's very bottom funnel, demand capture, conversion oriented. Demand gen, on the other side, as the name suggests, is about, instead of just capturing demand, it's also cross-network, multi-channel, however you want to call it. But it's a bit higher up the funnel. It's mid-funnel into upper funnel. It's much more reach-oriented. You can make it more conversion-oriented, but I actually don't recommend that because that increases the conflict with PMax, as we'll see later on. But it's also becoming, by now, quite a mature technology. It was already basically a rebrand of Discover campaigns, which have been around for quite some time, and they just kind of put the power of YouTube into it. And the newest here, which is not mature at all, as we'll see later on. I don't want to be too hard on it, but just like PMax was less than desirable when it rolled out, AI Max feels pretty raw at the moment to me. But it also feels like there's a high degree of potential here due to the amount of transparency that's available outside the gate. There's, there's search term reporting for it right away. There's these landing page and headline and URL reports. You can really see what it's doing and where, and you can look at that. You can control it with negative keywords and stuff like this. So I think it is I just think the worst days of all this black box stuff are behind us. None of these campaigns are really black boxes anymore. If someone's still calling, I mean, you can challenge me in the Q&A if you want and tell me these are black box campaign types. but things are dramatically different than a few years ago. Now, the question to me, and what we're going to spend some time talking about, is how this all fits together, because this is the power pack, right? You know, these guys are bros. They go drinking beers together. That's the feeling you get from these campaign types. Google says that this is one coherent package. And I've tried to capture what I think Google's view is here. And this is a modification of a Google sales slide that's a little old. It didn't have AI Max in there and stuff, but I've tried to give what I think Google's view of this is. And it looks like this. You know, you've really got these video reach and video view campaigns. Also, standard display campaigns could be lumped in there that are much more awareness oriented. Then you've got demand gen, which is AI powered, and video action campaigns is a very important cornerstone of demand gen. Actually, the order of these icons in there is meaningful. It's YouTube first. Oh, actually, no, I think I have old version of the slide. That's okay. It's really YouTube and display first. YouTube and discover first, followed by display, Gmail, maps. And then PMax is into this, as I mentioned earlier, this demand capture zone. And then AI Max is designed as an expansionary layer. AI Max Smart Bidding Exploration is also a new expansionary tool. Google's working really hard to offer expansionary things. Even PMax in and of itself is quite expansionary. It features all the channels in there, and really they're trying to be as bottom funnel as possible and also do that everywhere that they possibly can. Every channel, every placement, every search term, they want to cover as much ground as they possibly can. And this is, I think, the way that Google views this whole technology, where this bottom third of the chart is the power pack. But this is how it feels to a lot of us in the field, because it's not so clear at all. The level of overlap and redundancy between these technologies, to me, is quite concerning. I want to talk about it a little bit. First off, there's PMax and shopping. These two are, I mean, it's obvious that shopping is a very large part of PMax for e-commerce. It's a very large part of the costs. We know now from the channel reporting that, you know, when you look at feed only costs and stuff like that, there's also a ton of YouTube in there. There's a ton of dynamic remarketing on the Google Display Network in there, but shopping is still a very important part of PMax. So the thing is that starting in October of last year, just about a year ago, PMax no longer has priority over shopping, and that's good and bad. The problem is that there's plenty of room for conflict here. When you are running PMax and shopping next to each other, you have to look at a couple of conflicts here. Like, are they targeting the same products or not? And then if they're targeting the same products, are they also targeting the same queries or not? And you don't have control over that part because it's a keywordless campaign. You can only implicitly influence this by changing your bids, your budgets, which, yeah, stuff like that, so that you can maybe appear in different parts of the funnel. You can do negative keywording, this kind of stuff. But there's absolutely room for conflict between these two. And my concern here is that Google says this is not a problem because AdRank solves this. When I asked Google about this, because I don't understand that, if the feed is the same and the landing pages are the same, and you know, the landing page quality and search term matching relevance, this is handled by Google, then what is there that differentiates these two campaign types? And actually, Google confirmed that it's only the bid, but they also tell me that no bid escalation will occur. So we're going to get to that in a second. What I've seen is that the amount of hybrid setups where people are running PMax and shopping next to each other is increasing over time. And I'm actually just going to zoom in a bit here. And by the way, like I have a couple of caveats there. I haven't looked if there's product cannibalization going on in these or product overlap. I haven't looked. This is just at face value, the amount of accounts that have hybrid setups in them. It's that yellow line there. So let's zoom into a bit, and we can see that there are three kind of clear phases to this. A lot of hybridization, you could call it, happened just during the core growth period of PMax. And that's just because people were, I think it's unintentional often. People had standard shopping campaigns. They had smart shopping campaigns that got migrated, and they ended up in a situation where PMax and standard shopping were running next to each other, maybe without giving it that much thought. And, you know, everyone knew that PMax took priority over standard shopping. So you didn't kind of have to think about it too much. Like you could do some creative things there. But basically shopping was acting as a catch-all. And then we reached this very stable phase for quite a long period of time where that share didn't really do anything. It stayed about 15%. But starting just about a year ago, when this change in priority occurred, we see that the amount of hybrid setups started growing again. And it makes sense because people said, hey, I can play with this now. I can do something with this now. So that has really come kind of at the expense of PMax. But again, I want to iterate that Google Ads is thriving. It's doing really well for Google. It's growing a lot. PMax is growing and shopping is growing. And so somehow this is like incremental spend. People are basically spending this on top. They're spending more. So it's not that it's really like, oh no, PMax's revenue is going down or something like that. And this is why I think Google saw this opportunity. I'm sure they were like, hey, we can probably earn more money if we would just take away this priority thing that people don't like anyway. But the question comes up about conflict. And so this is really preliminary research. I research things really iteratively, especially this is complicated and it will take layers and layers of research. So I'll share those findings with you in the future. You can tune into future webinars or you can follow me on LinkedIn, whatever. But what I'm seeing here right now is kind of crazy. At face value, like basically we can see the CPC range. This is not the full range, but it's where like 50% of the bids land based on a couple billion clicks. 50% of the bids land in this range when it's shopping only. And then you can see like PMax only. The other gray bar is a lot higher. PMax CPCs tend to be a bit higher for whatever reason. And then as soon as you're running shopping in hybrid with PMax, the range, it is actually kind of hybridized. It looks, comes almost as low as shopping does, and it goes almost as high as PMax does, but it looks a lot more like PMax bidding. And so it's quite fascinating. Like I said, it needs more research, but the median CPC shifts up and becomes much more similar to a PMax median CPC. So this is exactly the type of thing that I'm worried about. And I just want to make sure that Google takes this seriously and gives us the best possible answer that they can, the most detailed possible answer that they can, because saying that bid is the only factor between which ad will serve, but also saying that there will be no self-competition and there will be no bid escalation does not make sense to me. Maybe I don't have a Stanford Google IQ. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense to me. And I would love to understand it more. And I'll keep looking. So I'm losing my voice a little bit today. Pardon the sips of water in between. Let's look at demand gen and PMax because, again, these are supposed to be buddies in the Power Pack, but there's a massive amount of overlap between them in terms of the inventory that they serve. Demand gen basically serves the entire asset part that PMax is serving. The difference here, as a reminder, is that demand gen is supposed to be mid-funnel and Performance Max is supposed to be bottom funnel, highly conversion oriented. So this schematic gets more complicated, and you can look at it at your leisure another time. I want to keep the webinar moving along, but in a nutshell, there are steps you can take that makes demand gen more like PMax, and I think you should be careful taking some of those steps, because as soon as you've introduced a product feed to demand gen, and as soon as you're optimizing for conversion, and as soon as they're targeting the same products as each other, you're making demand gen behave more like that PMax campaign, and the risk for conflict increases. And I was told by Google's product team that once again, when there's a conflict between these two on this kind of inventory, that ad rank boils down to CPC, and I see the risk for bidding escalation once again. What I think is incredibly cool about demand gen, and I give a lot of respect to Google here, is that they have allowed now channel controls. Super easy, mix and match, one-click channel controls for demand gen. I love this feature. I think it's one of the most exciting experiments that you can do in Google Ads right now. And I also think that you can help control the potential conflict that you have with PMax campaigns through this means. And even more importantly, Google has continued, or as importantly, Google has continued adding transparency to demand gen as well. We'll see what that looks like in just one sec. But most recently, they added additional network segments for YouTube in-stream, in-feed, and shorts. And that corresponds to the controls that we see here, in-stream, in-feed, and shorts. And that's a thing of beauty, because you need to be able to see this data to make decisions. So I'm really excited about the direction that this is headed, and I'm grateful to Google because we know that it could go differently, because it has in the past before. Oops, I forgot I have a wrong headline there. Pardon me. I always have at least one. It's my trademark. But as I said, you need to look at the data to make these decisions. And so I've looked at some high-level data here across a lot of accounts, and just to show you how this has evolved over time. So previously, demand gen was all these gray bars cross network. That's exactly how PMax shows if you do a network report of PMax. Then they created this new funny category called Google-owned channels, but it was basically synonymous with cross-network. And then earlier this year, they finally started splitting out the reporting. And as we've seen, they've even added a couple of new network segments here. So you can go into report editor and build this. It's super easy. You just have to go to report editor, select demand gen campaigns, and add network as a segment. That's it. And then whatever metrics that you want. I know I guess there's also UI, like pre-built reports, but I think the amount of control you have with report editor is just really terrific, and I always recommend using it. Now we're on to this one. This is the newest. AI Max, Dynamic Search, and PMax. As I said, like the power pack, the idea is that these guys are buddies and they should play along with each other. But this technology is now triplicated. Some of this technology triplicated. In the power pack, you have final URL expansion, which belongs to PMax. And you have text URL optimization, which belongs to AI Max. And then it's called the third thing, but it's basically the same in standard search campaigns, dynamic search ads. And so my concern here, I don't have the reporting elements from Google that I need yet to do this. They're adding the AI Max match type to report editor and the API in the future. They'll also add the PMax match type. These things are coming, but I'm very confident that 9 out of 10 people who turn on AI Max probably also have a PMax campaign with assets, and they probably also have standard search campaigns with DSA ad groups. So I do not believe that this is an okay way to run an advertising account. And I do not believe that this is like in any way sustainable. So my core hypothesis here is that dynamic search is going to get migrated at some point. There's going to be a migration because it's too much to maintain all this. But there's a lot of revenue flowing through DSA, so they have to do it carefully. I haven't built one of these crazy charts yet for that, because building that for 3 different things, you're going to have to bear with me. I need a whiteboard, some Red Bull. I don't know what. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to show you 2 different views on it. This is what Google says about these conflicts. If it's a bit small, you can read this later on, but they basically say when it comes to targeting the same queries, that keyword prioritization will work the same way as it does now. And of course, AI Max is keywordless, but so is PMax. What they mean there is there's this funny rule that if a search keyword matches a query identically, then the search campaign will take priority. Otherwise, you guessed it, ad rank will solve priority, but you now have potentially an ad rank battle between your search campaign, your PMax campaign, and then or rather your dynamic search ad group, your PMax campaign, and your AI Max layer that you've applied. And to me, that's not going to work out. Here's an independent stance. Andrew Loke made this really handy table. It's a lot simpler than whatever crazy diagram I would have built anyways. Thank you, Andrew, on behalf of all of us. But he sees it really very much the same way that I do, that there's a conflict here. And so he looks at, what do you have? Do you have PMax with full assets? Are you using DSA or not? And then he gives you the recommendation about how you should configure AI Max to prevent that conflict from happening. So that's a handy table. Definitely check that out. Yeah, I've just got a couple slides left, and then we'll get into Q&A. I want to share with you a couple of really early findings I have about AI Max. It's very expansionary, as I said. Like I showed you, it's designed to expand. In that table of how I think Google envisions this funnel that has this expansion layer at the bottom of it, that's AI Max. And my concern here is that you have to be really careful about where it expands, because in its credit, it will expand. You will get probably more impressions and more reach than you were getting before. And you really might also get more conversions. It's really a matter of what are you buying. So I'm not saying that this chart is representative. This is a sample size of 1. It is 1 account. I think it might even be 1 campaign in this case. But what I saw was that AI Max, you can see that's the leftmost match type. AI Max started massively serving on Google Search Partner Network. And, you know, it makes sense. It's looking for something that isn't adequately tapped by the campaign so far. And if you have a pretty mature campaign, this is the thing, if you have a pretty mature campaign, then it might start looking in strange places. It might start looking places you don't want it to look. And in all fairness, I want to say that search partners did not generate a lot of cost in that situation. That's also kind of embarrassing, because the intent is so low that search partners can't generate clicks because there's no intent, so it can't generate costs, which is another topic. But in yet another instance here, I found that AI Max massively started scaling impressions and conversions. But again, it's the leftmost bar here, but it was on competitor terms. And so you can't blame the AI. It's like, oh, here's all these queries that are not being targeted right now, and they convert well. There's demand here. That's valid, except that maybe there's a reason they weren't bidding on competitor terms before. Maybe they don't want to start a bidding war with their competitor. So these are just things like, I think AI Max, it's like I said, it's expansionary, and you just have to make sure that there are guardrails on there. These things are solvable. You can opt out of Search Partner Network. You can add negative keywords on your competitor terms. I think there's even specifically a new control coming for AI Max so that you can opt out of like all brands and not just your own brand. Because you might find that scaling into your brand traffic as well. You can't really fault it for that. That's what its job is to do, is to expand, but you have to make sure that it's expanding smartly. So having said that, that's what I've got for you today. Thank you for your attention so far. I have just a few minutes for some Q&A. Let me stop sharing. And give me a second here. See if I can find my Q&A bar. Here we go. All right, let me just run through a couple of these as quick as I can. Have you heard anything about separate tracking or visibility into how AI mode is performing? Well, no, we know that on the organic side, that does not exist in Search Console, and on the paid side, that's not available that I'm aware of, and I don't think that it will be for a long time. That's just, I'm not expecting it to. I would love to know though. I think this is experimental inventory, and Google owes it to advertisers to show how it's performing, because I think that they're going to need to learn how to handle that. It might not be as easy for them to bid on, because these queries could be much longer. They're not queries, they're prompts, they're chats. They could be much longer than what Google has been modeling their AI on for years. Do you think that, as a follow-up, that a media buyer should care about tracking AI mode versus AI overviews versus standard inventory? Yeah, I absolutely do. For what I just said, I think the risk is much higher on the new inventory. I think there could be huge successes in there, but also huge waste, and we need to know about that. For smaller brands, there's a new question that obviously don't have big budgets to test. I guess they should wait a little bit more for AI features to prove that they're working. What should these brands do until then? Just sit and watch? I mean, I agree with you. I think that there's nothing shameful in being a second mover or a first follower or waiting for someone else to test the waters. But unfortunately, you can't opt out of that. If you have these campaigns running, to the best of my knowledge, in these regions, targeting these languages, whatever, it will serve. So I don't think that there's an opt-out available, unfortunately. So that's just going to happen as far as I know. We're seeing shopping performance better than PMax from a ROAS perspective. And with this data, I question the value of running PMax if you have the ability to manage manual shopping campaigns. Well, no one ever said that standard shopping is broken. Follow the data. You know, if standard shopping is working, I see that sometimes too, that it outperforms PMax. Then go with standard shopping. Other people might find that standard shopping, maybe they perform similar in platform, or PMax performs even a bit better, but then you look at your new customer acquisition or whatever, that's a totally valid decision. Standard shopping still works. And, you know, it was rumored for a long time if they would deprecate the technology or not. And I'm seeing sales decks from Google pitching hybrid PMax and shopping, and telling people, yeah, add shopping into your mix. So I think they've really changed their tune here, and there are no signals that technology is going away in the near future. So I say go for it. Is PMax CPC just higher because of the search clicks costing more than PLAs? Very interesting question. And it could be. I have to make sure. I'll do some further segmentation. Thanks for that tip. DSA is still better than AI Max, in my opinion. AI Max for me is generally competitor terms or just very broad. Yeah, I saw a lot of competitor terms in AI Max too, and I've heard this time and again. Again, I think DSA works perfectly well. But AI Max, my initial guidance was, this is probably the future technology. We've seen okay results on the search side of PMax. AI Max should behave similarly. But now I'm really suggesting to people to be really cautious. If you have a mature setup, probably expect less uplift. And there's probably even more risk. Like if you have an immature search setup, there's probably more low-hanging fruit. Maybe you haven't got it all. AI Max might really help. But if you're already kind of maxed out, then what are the odds that AI Max is magically going to find something that you missed? Probably a bit lower. So I think there's nothing, no one says you have to use this technology. Yeah, okay, there's some more questions about the shopping CPCs because of manual bidding and stuff like that in standard search campaigns. Excellent note, well taken. I'm going to continue working on that research. As I said, it's a preliminary finding. It's eyebrow raising to me. I don't want to make a definitive statement there. Can we show the segment split for demand gen again, please? You'll get the slides. You can view it there. But basically, demand gen, we don't have the data for back when it was discovered because it was that network segmentation wasn't available, but it was presumably it was discover campaigns, and then it became. I would assume that it was discover plus some YouTube plus if there whatever else was in there earlier on, but now really YouTube has taken a front seat. It's very YouTube forward, and second foot is discover, and then a long tail of the other stuff. So I stated let demand gen be demand gen. So should we optimize for clicks rather than conversions? I'm not going to tell you what to do, make your own decisions, but I think that it's supposed to be a mid-funnel campaign. It's supposed to be more reach oriented, more consideration oriented. So yeah, I would consider optimizing more for reach, soft conversions if you have some in e-commerce. But if you would optimize for hard, like the further down the funnel you go, the more you're increasing, you're not letting it be mid-funnel anymore. You're bringing it down the funnel, and Google says it's a mid-funnel campaign. So why do that? I don't think you should be scrutinizing your return on ad spend for demand gen in that way or stuff like that. You know what I mean? It seems AI Max serves more in search partners than standard campaigns. I don't like this at face value, but I look at overall performance. The ROAS is better than pre-AI Max or other non-AI Max search campaigns. So why should I be worried about search partners? Listen, search partners is often harmless because, as I mentioned, it often doesn't generate clicks because the intent isn't there. I just think it's bloat. It's often bloat. In principle, search partner network is great. You can be on eBay and YouTube is a search partner, and you can appear on all kinds of really cool websites. But there's also stuff on there that, if I would, humans are not visiting these links. These are malware sites. These are made for advertising sites, made for bots. And I can show you that because we have search partner placement data now. And, there's no way there's an ad serving on there. My IT department would never let me visit that ad. My browser won't even let me visit that ad. It's flagged as not secure, so I don't know, but you can be opted in. Some people see great search partner performance, others don't. Someone else, we buy a lot of impressions in search partner network, but the CTR is very low, so you don't see very much cost in search partner network. Exactly, I agree with that. Someone else saying they have 0 reasons to run DSA. Well, earlier we had someone saying, let's stick to DSA. We have someone else saying they have 0 reasons. It's been completely replaced by the Power Pack. How am I wrong? Follow the data, look at the data, look at the controls you have. They're very similar, but different. And if you think that AI Max is at parity or better than DSA, then that's awesome. I'm not going to dispute that. I just think that this technology is triplicated and something's got to go. And it's probably going to be DSA. It's not in the Power Pack. Let's see, view through conversions many times are not incremental, and it seems that sometimes PMax or demand gen focus a lot on video ads. Yeah, I mean, you can You can look at your result type reporting in the PMax channel report. You can also look at that in your demand gen report, and you can see what's going on with your view engagements. I mean, actually, I think Google even has some new views that focus more on view through, because to try to equate with Facebook more, Meta, but that's very much whether they're incremental or not, how the performance is. It might. I'm also not a huge fan of view through conversions, but it depends what the goal of your campaign is. Google is saying that a keywordless future is near and inevitable. I don't agree with that notion, but thinking of AI Max as a mean to an end, cancel classic search and DSA campaigns. Yeah, I don't. I think that the keyword will prove more long-lived than we imagine, but it's just losing prominence over time more and more. And yeah, broad match is becoming increasingly pronounced now. Keywordless technology directly in search campaigns. It's clear that the focus has shifted. Well, we got a few more questions, but I'm basically out of time now, and maybe I'll be able to answer some more of these in a follow-up. I can't promise it. I have to look at them. Sometimes I write like a follow-up blog. I've done that in the past. But I really want to thank everyone for their time, everyone who joined, everyone for their questions and their engagement. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for being here.